discussing the annual plan consultation document. We'll start with Karakia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
All right. So for those online in chambers, we've got myself, Angela, Jennifer, Bruce, and Noel. Online, we have Clyde. We expect Robbie to join us shortly. I haven't had any specific apologies. Oh, other than Warren, yes. Okay, so whose hands are we in? Yours to start with, or? Jane.
So Jane will lead us through this, really to reinforce your comments, Madam Chair, that this is the chance to look at the proposed text for the annual plan consultation document before you formally adopt that at the end of this month. Jane's also got a slide that shows the some of the graphics and how the document's shaping up in terms of design, which is obviously very much pulling from the LTP. So it just looks like a continuation or subset of that. We've got probably one proposed change to some of the text from staff, and obviously there's an email that's come through from Councillor Ma with a couple of points on as well. But Jane, maybe if I get you to step through the presentation, and then we can just take the topics or the content that's been circulated for the meeting and take council feedback on that.
Right, welcome, Ben. Jane.
Thank you. Dave, we could go to the next slide, please. So thanks, Janine. As Janine's noted, the purpose of this workshop is to provide you with the text that we're proposing for the annual plan consultation document, and it's an opportunity to give us feedback prior to its adoption on the 27th of March. We've also included a couple of design elements to give you a sense of how it will shape up and be presented. I've also noted there's no further updates to any of the financial information that was included in your agenda. So there's no financial update today. Next slide, please. Just the legislative context for this process. When an annual plan has any significant or material difference from the long-term plan, then we must consult with the community. And the consultation gives effect to the principles of the Local Government Act, Section 82, and it's also guided by our significance and engagement policy. So staff have now prepared a draft document, which is in your agenda. This has been based on the feedback and the guidance provided by Council when you set the budget in February, 10th of February. So through that meeting, Council has resolved to consult on the regional public transport rate, options for a new targeted rate to fund the Wharekawa Coast River and Catchment Management Programme, revisions to schedule of fees and charges, as well as a new rates remission policy in relation to the primary industry compliance rate. Through that meeting on the 10th of February, councillors have also asked to include a couple of additional pieces of information for discussion only. This included potential application of the prior year surplus, discussion of the Coromandel comprehensive consent renewals, and discussion of proposed changes to public transport fares. So,
sure.
Why did we include the discussion on the Coromandel comprehensive consent renewals? Warren's raised it in his. We aren't consulting on it, but we're inviting consultation on it by putting it in there.
So I think the discussion around that matter was the use of reserves to fund those initial costs for this 3-year period. And yes, so that it was requested through the conversation to include disclosure on that in the consultation document.
That invites comment. So it is a formal consultation. What I'm concerned about is it is a consultation item rather than a discussion document on that item, because if we invite, it might be a perception of what it is, but we are in reality asking for feedback, submissions on the way which we're looking to do that piece of funding.
And because
Sure.
there are other items that have been included, even though they are not consultation
It's in
things.
But-
But to Janine's point, it has been included because counselors asked for it to be included. If counselors have changed their mind on that,
No change of mind, but I'm just wanting to ensure that by inviting, by putting in there, we are by default accepting that we will get submissions on it, and that is not going to be, well, we didn't consult on it, and so we're not taking any notice of it, or we can't take any notice. I don't want that scenario.
I would put this in the continuum of we're informing. We're not, because there's no questions that we're asking around this topic, but we are making clear and transparent the assumption that we have applied to this.
Okay, so I don't want to jump ahead because I can wait till Warren, but like, for example,
For warranted apology.
we inform, but some of the community or the majority of the community who submit, if they do, may come back and say, well, we actually want a different mechanism where we protect the reserves, increase the rating. Do we have the ability to do that? Because often we say, and I've heard, is that you didn't consult on this, so you can't do it.
Yeah, so that's right. And that's why I say it's informing, because we haven't actually given them any information to allow them to actually give us that advice. So they may say that, but there's nothing in here to say what's the impact of a different funding decision.
And that's my concern.
What council had asked for was that there was information contained in the consultation document to make it clear that that was how we were funding that activity, not that we consult on it. So that's the start that we've taken.
Well, then I will be asking that there is some clarifying point that whilst we're informing you, we are not consulting, make it absolutely clear, and thus feedback supplied can't be utilised because of X, Y, Z. Otherwise, we're not being transparent, because if we are putting it in front of them, then we are inviting feedback, and if we cannot act on their feedback, then I think we need an explanatory note in there how this is going to work. This is a courtesy we're telling you, but the reality is, as we're not consulting, it won't be acted on should there be submissions.
So it might be just something that we're going in FYI or something like that. So it's just for your information as opposed to anything.
would that not pertain to everything that's
It's not a consultation.
not a
Yes, it does.
consultation?
Expectations and aspirations.
Yeah, so there's probably a couple of things within the document that fall
Under that.
under that. And Jane, sorry, you'll have the marked up, design document in terms of maybe the way that that's separated around what we're consulting on, and then, other matters that we're telling you about, but they're not for consultation. And I think that separation, we can where everything's sitting. So it's not taking it out, but it's sitting sort of after effectively the bits that we are actually really asking for feedback on.
All right, I've got Bruce, Ben, and Jen. Bruce.
Okay, thanks. I'm just checking in. I know that Warren sent some questions or comments in, and I can't recall the previous discussion, but I'm just interested in knowing whether Warren, in terms of his constituency, whether he had a view on this. Did he make it clear what his view was on whether this should be in here or not?
I I think he was the one asking for it to be included.
That's what I was wondering. Exactly. Thank you.
Ben,
Oh, it's just looking at the first page, why we're consulting, and then our proposals, just following up Noel's point. Some of those financial matters aren't consultation then, so it's just a way you'll need to vary that first page.
Jen,
No, and my question was flowing on from that because I see what Noel's getting at. The prior year surplus one then doesn't have a question, but it is kind of reading as if it's inviting that feedback in order to make us change our mind one way or the other. Is that just a special case in that sense because it's that particular topic, or are we lumping that then with whatever we write for the Coromandel thing? That
Yeah, well, again,
It's
it was something that councillors
I
had
remember.
wanted, that we are very transparent
Yeah.
through this, but the noting and the text does note, council will make a decision on that.
Yeah.
As part of the setting of the final budget. So. that's
And
a
you
bit-
and I understand that, but to someone reading, they're kind of, it's implying have an opinion, but it's not guiding it to be either or.
So,
I wonder if we're going to get a whole range of views, because I could tell one or two people in the council want to rustle up people to have an opinion one way or the other. So I just want
Yep.
to make sure we get to a place that's well informed.
So I think
I like
we
transparency.
can take away the sort of separation of what we're really consulting on versus some things that we want to inform you on.
Yeah.
And make sure that that's really clear.
And then it is what it is, I guess.
And we know through these processes, we get feedback on a whole heap of things, whether they're in the document or not.
That's
So your decision making is then around the consultation topics.
Yeah.
When you,
I
before
guess
you set
the
budget.
reason I agreed with Noel was because people putting in the effort to put that submission in, not feeling that they did this and then realizing that it was not worth their time because they didn't interpret it.
And I'm not sure if
That
I
was
may
all.
jump in on that, is that when we had that split decision, because it really was a split decision, whether we were articulating what we actually wanted, because I thought with that decision, we would be asked for feedback. We would be asking for feedback on what, maybe arrange, put it into the fund, the investment fund, put it into a reserve for a rainy day, like we've done with that computer thing that we just got rid of. Yeah, so a suite of options that would come back to guide us, but just to mention it, it's going to invite submissions or comments, whatever we like to call them. So maybe we need to rethink what we actually wanted with that question, because we said, yes, tell them, but we didn't discuss what we wanted from that question. And I thought we wanted commentary or feedback, which is therefore a consultation in effect. So we can move on, but it's something to reflect on, please.
yeah. My recollection of it was that it was clear in that discussion that it was not a consultation topic, but people wanted us to do the FYI
There was.
and use this as an opportunity to do
There
that.
was concern expressed through the discussion around the degree of transparency that there was in relation to that prior year surplus. And I guess from a staff perspective, we've been saying we actually are pretty transparent on that. It gets reported through committees, obviously through EP consultation. We identified the work that was being done and funded through the surplus. But there was a request, my recollection of the meeting was a request that we be transparent at this point in time. And I think the story is effectively, previously we've used it to actually advance some strategic opportunities, but there could be the opportunity to offset rates revenue, which are effectively the two schools of thought.
Absolutely, but then that begs a question, and if we get feedback on it, how do we actually utilise that feedback? And I think we were short-sighted in what we wanted to be included. And as a result of including it, what do we then do? Do we ask a question or do we just ignore it? And because the worst thing to do is mention something to somebody and then not allow them to have a comment.
So possibly just while we're still on that prior year surplus topic, that is one where we're proposing some additional words to go in there. Won't address that, but it, more to quantify the impact of what using the surplus would be on rates, because I think that's actually really important.
Mm.
So, Dave, can you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just
don't wanna
wanting
leave
to
that
check
with-
in
Yep.
because I don't know what your slide deck looks like. And so I don't know how much there is to go. And I'm just wondering if we let Jane take us through her slide deck and then come back, because you might answer some things or you might
Yeah.
shed some light on some things prior to
just
us.
one-
But I'll go to you, Bruce, or Ben, sorry.
So just to clarify, it appears to me, looking at this, the one I'm interested in is Kiowa. There's only two things we're actually consulting on: public transport and Kiowa. And with the Kiowa one, you don't get to say if you don't live in the Kiowa area.
Yes, you do.
You're,
It's just obviously, well, because I think that's important because there is still a 30% regional contribution going in
Right.
there. But it is to distinguish submissions with those who do live in the area who will be paying the lion's share. So in
Yeah.
terms of, the reporting that the team can do, it will help with that.
so this document's only essentially got two questions.
The rates remission and the schedule.
No, there's no question there. Well, in that case, it needs a question then, isn't it? We just need to set out, or 1, 2, or 3 things we're asking you to submit on, or
And maybe you'll provide us that surety as you take us through, but I'm just going to check in with you, Stu.
I was
Is
just,
there-
I guess particularly around the coromandel consent thing as well. I just think you need to be really careful what you share if you're not prepared to give people who are largely not being privy to all the conversations and so quite uninformed, you'll just get them all revved up and becomes a pointless exercise. And the same with what you're just talking about, you need to explain to people that not only 30% will be generator funded, but that's how we do it around a whole bunch of other
Everywhere else.
projects in
Yeah.
the region as well. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
get a whole lot of people, oh shit, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right, Jane, I'm going to let you take us through the rest of your presentation, and then we'll circle back to any comments people want to make.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please, Dave. So this is an additional comment that staff have not included in the agenda, but staff are proposing would be helpful around the prior year surplus. So this is using the numbers, it illustrates what the result would be of offsetting rates. Essentially, it would be a one-off reduction in the general rates charge of about $1.90 for every $100,000 of property capital value. So $9.50 for a 500K property, $19 for a $1 million property. So it might just be some additional information there that would allow a submitter to see what they're actually
The next year, yeah, how much it goes.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so that's why it references a one-off reduction.
But I think the point Noel is making is
Yeah.
that we're all clear that reduction in this year
As a percentage.
would mean an increase in year 2 and possibly year
We could
3.
add one more
So
sentence
we
to
can't show them
clarify.
the upside as in money in your pocket without showing them, oh, we're going to take some
Well,
later.
Yeah, and so I think that was my intention was saying it's a one-off reduction. So you get a one-off saving, that's all. Because if you go like for like, then you've got a dip in the middle. I know,
Yeah, it's the next,
Mm.
it's the next year. It's the next year that has also got to be included, and I know Bruce has just said, it's in there, but not contextually. You've got to have it with this, in that, and as a result, so if this was the council's decision, that missing whatever, 4 million,
Will
would
be
have to,
made
would
up.
impact, X, Y, Z on a 500,000. It's on page 13 of the document, middle of the page. It needs to be
But next to
drawn
this-
out and put with this.
Could reshuffle it to down here.
It can be in there twice, but it needs to be emphasised that if you do this, there is an impact the following year.
And while I like it, I think you're heading in the language to the same language you're using in the actual consultation questions, and it seems strange not to then follow it with actual consultation questions. Just from looking at it from the outside in, format of extra info and a question. And here you've got extra info, no question. It's just about that clarity. I think we've got to decide, are we going all in to try and get stats on this? which I wasn't for, or are we willing to just be super clear that it's info only and we aren't actually asking, but we're telling you that it's an option for us.
Jane. So we might need to circle back to this, but thanks for giving us this context.
So that's the last of the sort of text slides. Now we're just actually moving through some design slides, so you can just flick through these. Thanks, Dave. So just showing how we are following the same graphics that were used in the long-term plan consultation document. And you can see, sorry, it's a bit small, but you can see essentially this will be the look and feel for the public transport question. Next slide, please, Dave. So showing what will be a full page map, which shows the 5 different rating categories and the explanations that go beside these. So we've actually got each of the towns that will be treated as serviced, which are highlighted and shown on the map. In addition, there's actually going to be on the Waikato Maps page, there's going to be an interactive map for both this topic and for the Wharekawa Coast consultation. This will allow users to enter their address and be provided with comparative options showing what the rate impact will be under each of those scenarios.
It's complicated. Disrespect, Madam Chair. Why can't we have a link in the consultation document, direct?
It is.
Yeah.
There will be a link to the rates calculator.
That's the rates calculator, but no, it's the map. It's the people want to know whether above or below the line. And so that map is nowhere near defined enough.
Mm.
And unless there's a simple click to a map, bang,
Mm.
that's what needs to, I asked for that in the,
I assumed that was how I was reading this. Is that correct?
There's somewhere at the front, there's a model being built. Mapping tools are being developed, 6B.
Mm. That's the intent. Can we get clarification that that is the intent?
That's
That
right.
there will be a link that somebody can click
The
on that will
address and-
bring up a
Yeah.
very clear map so that they can see whether they're in the blue or the green or the yellow.
That's
in the
right.
greatest
So
respect.
Mm.
I would have expected that because I haven't been able to click on that and get the map.
Yeah.
You know,
There's still, but it's still
Still
under
time.
development. That was in the paper.
it's been over a month. How long?
Yeah, but it is coming.
Yes.
Just a question there. I found the map that we've got in our document very hard to see. I presume it's still going to be quite small on the consultation document as well, isn't it? Or will it be a full page?
It will be a full page on the consultation document, so sort of this kind
Okay.
of size.
So it's an A4 document. is it?
A4 document,
Okay.
correct. But for people who are on the edges of those towns, I think they will be the people who are wanting to look at the interactive map and figure out whether they're in or out. It would also be something that you can zoom in on if you're viewing on screen. Slide, please, Dave.
I was just going to say on that one table, with the total mobility and community, it's repeated so many times. I just wondered, you guys did think about whether to just chuck it at the bottom with an asterisk to all of them or something, because it just bulks it up so much, and I worry people don't read properly when it looks like a lot of text.
You can have a look at that.
When it all
Yeah.
finishes coming together, have a look at it. Cool.
So similar
Oh, excuse me.
map options for Wharekawa Coast. These will be slightly smaller on the page, not a full page. But again, there'll be the interactive option where you can see whether or not you're in the low lying or the higher bracket for that option 1.
Great. Bruce?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly go back to the transport topic. The fourth paragraph down on page 4, where it says the rating cost to properties, I think that those sentences could be reworded to be way clearer about what's going on, because the sentence ends with a comment available in the area. And then the question is what area? So I'm just suggesting that a better way of explaining that would be to say the rating cost to properties in these categories, because you've already talked about the categories, is based on the level of public transport services available in each area. So it's making it really clear how the category and the place are linked in a logical sequence. Because the end of a sentence which just says in the area, then the question is what area? Anyway, that's just my take
Yeah.
on it. Having read it, I think it needs to be really clear.
Clear,
Yeah.
yeah.
I had a lot of other things on the transport one, but we'll come back.
Sorry. I don't know if you want it now or
Um,
we got to slide it.
Happy either way. No,
Huh?
we can discuss it now.
All right. Well, we've got the map in front of us, so
Yeah.
off you
No,
go.
We can do transport.
Okay, transport stuff. I wondered whether to add the piece around our region being the only region that doesn't have this, or adds anything or not, just
I
because
did
of
think that as well.
So I'm just flagging it that I thought that could be good. When we say in the second paragraph down, it says acknowledges different levels of access to a range of community. And further down, it talks about access again. I think if you say access and benefit would be really helpful to link that benefit, because a lot of the time I find when I'm reading it, I feel like it's always being coming through as a cost and need to have cost. And we can go slightly higher on just pushing the fact that it's giving people benefits. The third point was, I think a large part of the regional rating, I realize we've already decided, but people still ask perhaps, will there be cross subsidization or not? I think we could add a sentence to just clarify yet again. Not suggesting exactly where, but the fourth one was is whether it's worth mentioning that we've attempted to keep the levels as similar as possible to prior. Because I thought that was something that came through quite strongly in all the conversations, but didn't come through here. When we talk about total mobility services and defining that, it says people with disabilities or long-term impairments to access transport through subsidised door-to-door services. And then it goes on to talk about NZTA also helps to fund these. I think people have a question around subsidised by who, and I realise that the website that you can then go to will tell you that, but there's an open question there. Is it subsidised by this rate, or is it subsidised by central government NZTA? I actually don't even know the answer properly yet. But that clarifying of that could be quite helpful to not get people in a tiz. Then the next one was, we say in there the total amount we would collect is 23.2 million. I just wondered whether it would be helpful to put something relative in there, whether it's any kind of statement, because you're just putting it out there, it's 23 million. And I'm not sure if it's adding anything if you're not making it relative to something. So you could, I mean, in our conversations, we've always said there are no new services proposed. That was in all the tables, I think. That's the thing that makes it relative to me, or you could say relative to previous years, but that doesn't probably make sense. The other one was, we talk on the third paragraph on page 7 about we're doing all we can to ensure our public transport's run in the most financially efficient and sustainable way possible. Be nice to mention in there, to my point earlier, the best quality and as well, rather than just financially efficient and sustainable. We actually want it to be good,
Effective.
effective, anything like that. Efficient and effective.
Sustainable.
I just didn't want it only to focus on the finances, as said. And then the piece around, I read it through and then we got to the tables and it suddenly introduced this idea of Hamilton being rated CV. I thought, well, where's that come from? I know where that's come from, but to the reader, could be worth making clear why. And it could be in a simple way, such as just under the table with the areas outlined, making it clear how much or such a significant part is in Hamilton versus say only 15% in central and 5% in regional. Just to give people that context as to why on earth would you treat Hamilton differently, because we know.
Yes, I'm not sure that the difference in Hamilton is because of the concentration of services, but it's actually because that's the way it's currently rated. So that's going to
So
be.
we could say that,
Yeah, yeah,
which was also
yeah.
my point that I
Yeah.
had written next to it. So anything on that would be helpful.
It's
Of what we had
it's a lesser
before.
change model.
That
I
would be
guess,
nice
yeah.
to mention. That would also get to it. And also, why did we go towards the preferred option? Obviously, a lot of the time we talked about it's less complex. So we want to keep it simple in the places that are paying low amounts. I think that talks to the other side of the coin of that one. And that was fortunately it.
Bruce.
It's probably giving you stuff to think
Sorry.
about, but
Waiting
good?
for the next, waiting for
All
the
right.
next topic, sorry.
No.
Page 8, you've got impact on rate, the first table, the option 1, you've got 25, 26 onwards, 23.2 million. I think that's misleading, and so far it's 25, 26 only, because going forward, there will always be increases. So we need to get rid of the word onwards. And then going down to option 1, option 2, impact on rates. Can we look at putting the Hamilton City, Central Waikato and Regional Waikato into the same colours as in the map on page 5? Because some people will then, it pulls them back to that map so that they can correlate it. We're using colour in the process, so why can't we just differentiate?
Even with the shading
Instead of grey,
Yeah, yeah.
going orange, blue,
and blue and
and
green.
green.
You
Is
see
there a
what we're
problem with
saying,
that,
Jane?
Just pulls it back to that map.
Good suggestion.
And that's me for the moment. Thank you.
Bruce. You're calling you Bruce. Ben.
Yeah. It was just what Mole raised earlier about what we're consulting on and what we're informing people. Public transport fare increases, we're not consulting on, but it's there. So should that go to the information section at the back? We're telling them they're going up by 6.4%, 11.4% and et cetera, you're going to get a lot of people disagreeing with that, but we're not actually consulting them on that.
we just reference it and put it at the back.
Well, you're putting it for information. I mean,
There will be
they
increases
can
in public.
complain as much as they like, but we're not going to change that, are we? That's a decision that's been made.
And in line with central government direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which state's
Yeah,
in there?
yeah.
I do
yeah.
agree, because
Mm.
I think we should inform them of it. It's relative to this. It's just that by making it part of the full text of this.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that probably sits quite comfortably alongside the fees and charges changes. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we've got a statement of those.
Mhm.
Agree.
A fare is just another fee.
Yeah.
And you can reference it from here if you wish, yeah. But that way it's not in your face, as if it's about the rating. Yeah. I did wonder if, for the Hamilton one, obviously we're asking people to basically calculate in their head how much their house CV is and then 26 times that, right at the bottom of that section. Other than them going to their property, I had wondered whether it's worth one more table to just give them the usual breakdown or a bar graph or something to speed the process up for them so they don't have to go to the website. I mean, those who really care will. But it's not something that was super important to me either. It's just a thought for all those people in Hamilton who are going to comment on this. They are paying the majority. We could make it easier, perhaps. Yeah, I have heard that.
It might be a bad thing.
Then the rate factor will just go up.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's just, we could leave it like that and make them go to the website, or we could add one more layer into the document for people who don't go to websites. Yeah.
Might go down under option 1 too.
Or you could have one sentence or something saying average household value in Hamilton is 800,000, therefore it's 250. It's giving some relativity in the document to the $278 you had just above it, rather than $26, just to give
Yeah,
people a
I
bit
could
of.
see, something like that. The average CV in Hamilton is this, and that would be the equivalent.
Yeah.
To add a whole.
Otherwise,
a
I
bunch of
remembered the
ta-
bar graphs that you give us on rating impacts at the back
Mm.
sometimes, and it's really, you get to see where the spread is, and you could obviously make it the value that it would be.
Yeah,
Always had tables.
If you put average now.
Yeah.
So they can
We were going to add that anyway, weren't we, somewhere around.
well, I think if people go to
previous
their
currently.
property to see what their rates are projected to be, that will show what you're currently paying and then what the proposal is. Now, obviously, those rating impacts only show based on the preferred option. Alternative. So we can have a think about how we do that. We can either do it on an average value of a Hamilton property, which is pre-revaluation,
Yes.
or the other bit is the value at which the rating options for Hamilton are actually neutral, cost neutral.
Yeah, maybe add something to that effect, because what you just said is more
Between
than-
those two different models, there's a point at which some will pay less, some will pay
Yep.
more, which I think is the
Yeah, and what you just said there was that the model that you're sending them to on the website shows you what you're paying now and what the difference would be.
what the preferred
If you
option
could
is.
build that into the sentence there that you've got under the table to see what rating area category would apply. Well, what currently applies and would apply, it just helps people to want to go there because they can. Yeah, if that's what the website does, I think tell them that that's what the website does.
And it might be
current
in
and
terms of to see the
proposed.
impact of this proposal on your rates go to.
Yeah,
I like that.
it could be that. Yeah.
Wording is good.
Basically, if you've got a property that's less than $1 million, you're paying more, and if you're more than $1
Yeah,
million,
yeah.
you're going to pay less.
Yeah, you're a maths head, you do that real quick. I was just wondering for those other people.
Yeah,
You
pretty
know.
much.
I know, it's just, we've got a range out there, right?
Mm. All right, what next?
Do we want to have it? Is there any comments on the Wharikawa topic?
Yep, really good. Really liked it. Just that sorry, just reading the notes. Wouldn't mind adding that they're the only area of the region that doesn't have this, just to let them know that they're the outlier.
No.
Wouldn't you? Okay. Because it was leading to what Robbie raised around and you would say it better than me, Robbie, anyway, but it's that access to the emergency fund reserves that they currently contribute to
Oh.
through their general rates.
That's a whole different conversation.
But wouldn't that
Because they're
influence
not-
them to say yes or no to getting this rate?
They're not contributing, they haven't contributed into those reserves. At the moment, the proposal doesn't see them contributing into those reserves.
Okay, so they couldn't.
So
contribute themselves.
why would they have access to it?
I just thought that was part of getting this set up,
So
that
I'd
they
have-
automatically would.
Yeah,
Did I
no,
misunderstand that completely?
I think that's been a conversation. My advice to Greg, when
Yeah.
he'd raised it with me, was they haven't contributed in,
Yes.
and we're not proposing through this rates modelling for them to be contributing in at this point in time.
Okay.
So
Hey, I mean, if it doesn't do what I thought it would, then we won't mention it, but I thought it did. So, yeah.
I
Those
think if you
four
look at it from an equity perspective, though, where they have not contributed,
Yeah.
and they're not
I
under
get
this
that.
model not contributing, then why?
Use your mic.
Well,
Yeah.
they will have through the general rate, but that's 15%.
Have contributed to emergency funding for every other part of the region, but now we're going to give them a rate. We're not going to do that for them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, because the rest of the region is contributing at a percentage over their total rates revenue. So it's a loading on that. So through both the general rate and their targeted rates, that loading isn't calculated into these numbers. So
Okay.
I haven't been part of the advice that's been provided around access to those funds, but I would feel that if you're going to access the funds, you need to be contributing into the funds proportionate to everyone else that's contributing into that. And that
Yeah.
hasn't happened.
Okay. Well, we would like them to, the intention was we would like them to one day be in that position. We just thought this was automatically putting them in that position. That might be our misunderstanding. But what would we need to go through steps wise to bring them to that point? Because currently it looks like to me they are the sliver that wouldn't and doesn't get to play in the big game of emergency reserves. Yeah. Are you just saying it's another piece of work? Yes.
Yeah, but emergency work is a better word of saying that then there's emergency work required that they can,
So in terms of the other zones, they obviously have their own zone reserves that they
Yeah.
contribute into. And
Yeah.
of course, these guys don't have that.
yeah, yet.
And then there's the regional disaster recovery reserve, which gets contributed into from this. Well, these guys haven't, apart from the general rate contribution that
Everybody
everyone
else gets, yeah.
they haven't specifically contributed into those funds of that. So it would be, in the way that it has worked previously, is basically it's a premium that's applied over the top of the rates revenue, and that gets peeled off and put into those reserves
I
each year.
think you're putting them in a very difficult place though, where they're still contributing to the rest of the region and you're not going to include them in it. I think that's a failure on our part.
So can I be clear? I haven't been part of the advice that's been given to you previously. That hasn't been run. asked me as the person who sort of manages the funding. All I'm saying is that if you want them to have access to those reserves, then I think they need to be contributing on the same basis as
Yeah.
people in the region.
So let's
Which is
take
what we're
action
proposing here.
to,
Not from a
investigate that.
disaster recovery perspective.
Right.
This will give them a program of works. But
Mm.
it's not, it doesn't anticipate the additional 3 or 4% on top of that rate revenue that would make a contribution into those disaster recoveries. And we could look at that.
if we could, that'd be great.
I'm
But
just-
not
that's
part
the
of
main
this annual plan.
But if it's not part of
We
this
can't
thing,
we
then
need to stand up a program first.
if it's not part of this, obviously don't mention it. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think because the conversation's around and we think, well, ICM chair thinks that should be, let's take an action point to investigate that and get into that. And
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying they shouldn't, but I'm just making the point they have not, it's not factored in here. And from an equity perspective, they haven't, other than a general rate contribution, been making, there's no other provision for them.
It's a 3% on the general rate is what you're talking about.
No, it gets applied across the whole rate, so it's the targeted rate contribution. That's the
But
way
what
it
you're
works on-
suggesting here is that through this consultation, we have the opportunity to stand up a rating process and
Then start
a river and catchment management program,
Which will undoubtedly
which will
help.
then lead to a further conversation. So I suppose
Well,
that,
In the future, if we are to do this anywhere else, well, I don't know. We've got drainage areas that don't pay, that are self-management and
Mm.
stuff, so they won't be contributing at some point on some things. So I think it must be very clear in the future that you're going to have your rate for whatever it is for management of your river or your
Work program.
drain. But if you want this, that's going to have to be clipped on the side. I think we made a mistake by not putting that in the consultation right at the start.
I will come to you next, Tippa, but I've got Bruce just ahead of you. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Bruce.
So I thought this was an opportunity to explain a whole system approach. And at the moment, the justification for the 70-30 split is only justified on the basis of low-lying areas being more susceptible to flooding. And I'd like to see another sentence or a connecting sentence below that statement, which says, so at present it says, this acknowledges that the low-lying flat coastal plain is more susceptible to flooding and associated hazards. And I'm thinking of something along the lines of, while inland catchment areas influence water flows. Just to get the point across that the reason the split has occurred is because of the differential between the operations of those two ecosystems. This is an important point for the future when, whether it be a general rate or a targeted rate, that people understand the system and why we are doing it the way we're doing it.
Did you capture, have you got that? Got that? Somebody's got that?
Land.
Good. Tippa,
Just because we've been trying to onboard Wharekawa since I joined council, I'm just wondering if we could get a more decisive future point that this will be done. Is it into the next long-term plan? What is it? Because they've been kind of an outlier, my 3 terms, for at least 3 terms of council, while we've figured out how to bring them in, along with Hauraki District, now with this plan, and now with the Great Work councillors have done. So I just want to, not in the future, but when, if we can. Thank you.
like get a commitment through a work program, sort of.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Pamela.
yeah, so they've got their community plan that we've adopted and Waikato District and Hauraki have adopted. So this is just
This is the
step
beginning.
1 of like 27 steps or something. Probably 17 of which we don't know how to do yet, but yeah. So they do know they're on the journey.
Yeah, I just think it's somehow it's been elongated by the number of councils, but none of us are truly, you know what I mean.
So I think this decision was brought forward 12 months and to try and get this work program and the rate stood up. sooner than had previously been proposed, so
Mhm.
that we've actually got to that starting line, and then we can continue to work with this community from there, which
Mhm.
will obviously be informed by that community plan.
And Tipper, a huge driver of getting it done, this annual plan is, to Robbie's point
Yeah.
a while back, so we don't have to induct a whole nother 7 councillors to this
Into
and then
the
do it first
Waikawa
year of
Coast.
next year.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
really happy with this.
Totally agree.
yeah,
Thank you,
Totally.
guys.
yep, great. All right, Ben.
Yeah, a couple of points. So firstly, when we had the initial consultation with them in November, we were saying to them that this would bring them into the flood management scheme. So that's been part of the thing that sold it. Whether it was the correct thing to say or not, it was certainly what was an incentive, because there was some pushback from some of them who didn't want to pay a rate at all. Question in here about the 30% paid through general rate. Is that what every other scheme pays, general rate, 30%?
No, there's it's on the generous side probably. It does vary. Normally it's probably 15 to 20%. West Coast is probably the outlier at 50%.
That's fine. When it comes down to the map, when we're talking about the part where the map is, we talk about low-lying flat coastal plains will pay more, and hilly inland areas will pay less. When we get down to the map itself and then also the options, our wording is targeted rate for property in low land rating area and property in high land rating area. It really should be low-lying land and higher, otherwise you're
So-
confused.
Yeah, so, and I've just picked up, actually in here, I think we need to change all of our wording around that higher or lower. We talk about direct and indirect benefit areas everywhere else.
Yep.
And I think we need to be consistent here, that the higher land is direct, the lower land is the direct benefit, and then there's an area of indirect who
Yep.
pay less.
Happy for
And that will be consistent with other schemes that we have. Yeah. And it'll be illustrated obviously by the map, but yeah.
Yeah, so we had a meeting Friday with some of the ratepayers in that area. They definitely wanted a map to show which were the ones paying more and paying less, which that does. But my question is, how are we actually going to communicate with the Wharikawa Coast ratepayers directly? Are we going to send them a brochure or a flyer or because obviously they're the ones making the decision on
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So there's a range of tactics that will be used for the ratepayers in Wharikawa Coast. There is a community meeting being planned. I believe dates will be circulated with councillors shortly. There's also a flyer drop, I think, that's going out, as well as obviously that staff that are very close to that project are leaning on all of their contacts to raise awareness about the consultation.
Because there is a very good network already established there. And I don't know if we need to tap into Hauraki for that.
Yeah, I'm confident that Adam is working with Hauraki to make sure this works. He's kept me a little bit up to date with the plans that Jane's talking about.
And then in terms of hearings, looking at a day as close as possible that we can get to Wharikawa.
Yeah, sounded like possibly Thames from what I heard. Yeah.
And finally, just if you get a lot of feedback from people who are in the region who don't want to pay 30% for there, how do we weight regional ratepayers versus Wharikawa ratepayers in our feedback?
I
Yeah.
think you'll consider materiality of that feedback in terms of the stated impact on the general rate through their 30%, which is like 2 cents per 100,000, I think. So,
I mean, this isn't a referendum process either.
No.
Yeah, this is to inform your decision making.
weigh them, not count
And if
them.
they go, oh, well, we don't want to do it, well, you're quite happy to take it for everything else that's in your patch. So we've got to make a decision ourselves. And that's my point about, I'm actually a bit nervous about opening up that reserves decision because I don't think you'll get the sort of feedback you want out of it, but it's- yeah, well, you need to repeat to sit down with all the people that submit and explain what it's all about. At the end of the day, the reserves decision, I think, is more of a governance decision rather than a
Like the prior year super. All right. Anything else you want to take us through?
On the following slide, there's just a timeline showing there. So obviously the final document will be approved on the 27th of March ahead of public consultation from the 1st to 30th of April. And then 19th till 22nd of May will be hearings and deliberations, with tentatively the 19th to be held at Thames Coromandel Chambers for the hearings there. And then on 24th of June, Council will adopt the annual plan. The next slide, Dave. Just going over some of the tactics that will be used during that process. We'll have the document available at all of the usual locations. There'll be a multi-channel digital and radio campaign planned. Community drop-in event for the Whare Kawa Coast, as I've mentioned. Formal letters to stakeholders, including territorial authorities, and information for council and staff will be provided as well.
Sorry, just to clarify for Kaiawa, Whare Kawa, you're saying there's a mail drop there as well, or is it only the?
Yeah, so as I understand it, there is, but that's using the contacts of that project group. So they're sort of, yeah.
All right. I've got Noel and then Bruce. Noel.
Thank you. So when this comes to council on the 27th, what assurance are you able to give us that we will have a final document subject to any last minute discussion over a word or a phrase or whatever, but essentially a complete document with all the links, everything that we need to know? Because I don't want to be signing off something that I haven't got the full picture. So,
Well, other than some grammatical changes and the changes we've already discussed, are there any other changes to
no,
the
I'm just wanting
words?
to see that those changes will be incorporated and that will be the final document that we have in the agenda.
It's the intent.
Yep. So we've got a bunch of people in the room, including Jane. We've got Annika, Kim, from a comms perspective, myself, gathering that feedback so that we can work on how we best reflect that in. And obviously, as well as that, there's work on maps, the links, the rating calculators and all of that happening. That will be ready.
How early are you able to share that with us, do you think?
Which part of that, the revised document?
Yeah, whether it's the whole agenda or whether it's ahead of the agenda so that we can have good time to go through it. You know, like sometimes it's 2 or 3 days only, which is not helpful, but I understand why sometimes. But what I'm signaling is, can we have that as early as possible, and even if it's ahead of the agenda coming up? Thank you.
Can I just want to make sure, because, you know, the points that have been raised here on the narrative around the prior year surplus, are you wanting to see some additional words? Have we provided sufficient guidance to the team here as to what people want to see so that there's a level of comfort?
But you're directly at me. So the issue for me is that if you've raised the issue, give the people the opportunity to give feedback. Because if you are just telling them, we will get stuff and we won't be able to act on it directly. We can take it into our minds and whatever, and make this decision as governors, as Stuart said. But the issue, if you raise it with people, yeah, and that's where I think we stopped short when we decided, let's tell them about it. But then, having told them, what are we going to do?
So Jane, can I just check in terms of from the consultation process perspective that we will have that with the information that we're gathering, we'll still have that as a topic that we can look at the feedback that's received on it to report that to council?
Yeah, that's right. So that any
Even if it's
feedback
not
that
a
we
consultation.
receive that's not in relation to a specific question that we've asked, but is either something else that's included in the consultation document, or actually anything, the other part of council's business, that information will be provided to councillors through the hearings and decisions process.
Okay.
So if people are commenting one way or the other, we will capture that and report that back. I think to go any further than that is almost that you are, and I didn't take it that council was necessarily interested in feedback from the community on it, but you wanted to be transparent about the fact that we had the surplus.
That's what the resolution says, yeah.
It's
Some of the comments I know, from like Chris Hughes, was adamant. And I'm not saying I support Chris, but the reality is, I think from that, I took there was an expectation if we went out to the community and told them we've got the surplus, you know, what do you think we really should do with it? And I know I've taken the opportunity to talk to some people, and it's interesting. They're not interested in getting the money back. They want us, the majority want us to put it away for a rainy day, so we don't have these one-off impacts. Really good. But if I think those who voted for it had an expectation that there would be ability to comment on what should be done about it, or what with it. So, and if what I'm seeking is that feedback can genuinely be used to inform the decision that we do.
so we can collate it and theme it, and you've flagged that you've still got a decision that you're going to take before you set the budget. So that's actually what's stated in here. I think that
I'm
gives you an
pretty-
avenue.
I'm pretty
Right.
comfortable with the, sorry, did I jump in?
I've got Bruce and then Ben and then you, Jen.
Okay.
Bruce.
This is just a typographical matter relating to the famous dreaded clam. The dreaded clam's name, Corbicula fluminea, should be in italics, and the second name, the specific epithet, should be a lowercase f.
It's true. It's true.
The dreaded
Very
clam.
good.
I'm clammy.
So on the dreaded clam, I actually think that the way it's laid out on page 13 is incorrect. And that if you look further back up, we talk about, we're already allocating some of the money, such as protecting region from the invasive clams. That's where that text should go, not be a separate subset, because we're talking here about the prior year surplus. And it seems strange to get the prior year surplus and suddenly we've added that on. It's really just the fact we've already invested 414 million. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it's a pop-up box next to it, it makes more sense.
The other question is where we get to financial matters. Is that going to be called financial matters now, or are we going to call it for information? And then some of them are financial matters, but not all.
At the moment, they all are financial, but I think that's where we'll have a look at the design in terms of whether that becomes an FYI section. They just happen to be about numbers.
That's good. All right. And my note was, there's a paragraph in there before finalising the annual plan in June. And then at the end, I would have just added, or the usual practice of holding it for key pieces of work as explained above, or something, because you're kind of leading into this may include returning funds. And then it goes into the consequence of that. But I just thought that one sentence by itself could have the, or the usual practice. I just think the words usual practice would be nice to add somewhere in that whole paragraph. Yeah, and we do, in the higher up paragraphs, that's fine. I understand it's there for the reasons it's there. I would say it's still a complicated one. You might be surprised how many people submit with suggestions on how to use it for one-off projects. So it can go either way. And we might pass resolutions to say we investigate some of those even. So yeah, it's open. We're clear with the community that it is our governance decision. We're informing them. Let's see what comes. But good
All
work on the
right.
wording in general. from
Any
staff.
other comments? No, any comments? Yes, yes. Just checking online.
better in the
Any other
design version.
comments, Tippa or Clyde? If not,
No, all good here. Thanks.
hey, thanks,
Pamela.
Clyde. Thank you for that. And,
Thank you.
and yes, kudos, James. Well, or James.
Oh,
Oh
my goodness.
Obviously, one cup of coffee is not quite enough for me. Hey, thank you very much for what you've put together, Jane. I really appreciate it. I think thank how you've taken us through that. All right. Oh man, they're sprinting out of here. We'll close the workshop with the Kia.
Unahia mai te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te hinenaro. I te ara takatū koe rā e rongo, e whakaari aki ki runga, kia tīna, haumie, hui e, tae ki e.